A fighter pilot crashes into the North Sea in 1942, and his survival depends on a fabric most people today have never heard of. That's not a dramatic exaggeration. It's a documented reality. During World War II, engineers created a textile so tough, so clever, and so effective that it outperformed many materials we still rely on today. It kept airmen alive in freezing water. It resisted wind, rain, and abrasion without plastic coatings. And then, quietly, it vanished from mainstream use. Not because it failed, but because history moved on. This is the story of that fabric, how it worked, why it mattered, and why it deserves to be remembered. The wartime problem that demanded a miracle material. World War II exposed a brutal truth about survival. Technology could get you into the air, but it didn't always get you home. British pilots flying over the North Sea faced a deadly combination of cold water, high winds, and long rescue times. Falling into the sea often meant death within minutes, even if you avoided injury. Rubberized suits existed, but they cracked, stiffened, and failed under stress. Wool absorbed water and dragged men under. Leather became heavy and useless when soaked. What the military needed was something breathable yet windproof, water-resistant but flexible, strong without being bulky. That sounds like a modern outdoor gear catalogue, doesn't it? But this was the early 1940s. No membranes, no synthetics, no Gore-Tex. So, engineers turned to an unlikely answer. Cotton. The fabric was called ventile. At first glance, it looked unremarkable. Just tightly woven cotton. No coating, no chemical treatment. But, you know, the magic was in the weave. Ventile used extremely long staple cotton fibres spun into very fine threads, then woven at astonishing density. The weave was so tight that when dry, air barely passed through. When wet, something even more interesting happened. The cotton fibres swelled, closing the microscopic gaps between threads and creating a near-waterproof barrier. This wasn't theory. It was tested relentlessly. Immersion trials showed that ventile dramatically slowed water ingress, buying pilots precious extra minutes in icy seas. Minutes that meant the difference between rescue and death. Here's the clever part. Unlike rubberized gear, ventile stayed breathable. Sweat vapor could still escape. The fabric bent, flexed, and moved with the body. No cracking, no peeling, no catastrophic failure. Just physics and smart design. When people hear stronger than modern gear, they often think only in terms of tensile strength. That misses the point. Ventile's strength was, well, really quite functional. It resisted tearing under stress. It handled abrasion from cockpit metal, parachute harnesses, and even rough landings. It remained usable after repeated soaking and drying, you know. Modern synthetic shells often rely on laminated membranes. Once they're punctured, delaminated or contaminated, performance drops sharply. Ventile had no layers to fail. Damage was localized. A tear stayed a tear. It didn't spread. Even more impressive was its thermal performance. By blocking wind while remaining breathable, Ventile reduced convective heat loss, which, honestly, is one of the biggest killers in cold environments. This made it ideal, not just for pilots, but for Arctic explorers, mountaineers, and polar expeditions in the decades that followed. In raw survival terms, Ventile didn't just compete with modern gear. In certain conditions, it beat it. The Royal Air Force didn't adopt materials casually. Ventile garments were issued for immersion suits and flight jackets because, well, tests proved they worked. Not once, not in ideal conditions, but, repeatedly, under stress. There are recorded cases of downed airmen surviving far longer in cold water when wearing Ventile compared to standard uniforms. The fabric didn't make them invincible, but honestly, it shifted the odds. And in wartime, shifting the odds is, well, everything. The British military continued to use Ventile well after the war, especially in cold weather gear. Scandinavian forces followed suit. Civilian explorers embraced it. For a while, Ventile was the gold standard for extreme environments. Then, almost without warning, it faded from the spotlight. Ventile didn't disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because the world changed. After the war, petrochemical industries exploded. Synthetic fabrics were cheaper to mass produce. Nylon, polyester and later membrane-based laminates offered lighter weights and faster drying times. Marketing played its part too. Space-age materials sounded better than tightly woven cotton. Ventile was also expensive. It required high-quality cotton, precision weaving and time. In a world chasing scale and margins, well, that became a liability. Militaries streamlined supply chains. Outdoor brands chased trends. Consumers were taught that newer automatically meant better, and so Ventile slipped into obscurity. Still produced in small quantities. Still respected by those who knew, but, largely forgotten. Here's the part that really matters for a channel like Before Modern Times. Ventile, you see, represents a survival philosophy that actually predates all this disposable tech we're used to. The idea is use materials that fail gracefully. Design systems that rely on physical principles, not just fragile complexity. If Ventile gets wet, it adapts. If it's damaged, it still remains functional. And if it's cold, well, it blocks the wind. No batteries, no coatings, no maintenance rituals. That mindset echoes older survival strategies everywhere in history. Wool that insulates when wet, leather that molds to the body, linen that breathes in heat. Ventile belongs to that lineage, a bridge between ancient material wisdom and modern engineering discipline. Understanding how it works teaches us something bigger than fabric. It teaches us how humans solve problems before shortcuts existed. Today, Ventile is experiencing a quiet revival among purists, bushcrafters and historians. Not because it's trendy, but because it works. Because it reminds us that durability, repairability and intelligent design matter more than hype. In a survival context, especially one rooted in early 20th century knowledge, Ventile is a masterclass. It shows how much can be achieved with natural materials when they're understood deeply and used intelligently. History didn't erase Ventile because it failed. History just got distracted. And sometimes, the smartest move forward is looking back. If stories like this matter to you, if forgotten ingenuity sparks your curiosity, and if you want to keep uncovering the survival wisdom the modern world left behind, stay connected with Before Modern Times. Like the video, share it with someone who appreciates real history, and subscribe for more stories that prove the past was a lot smarter than we give it credit for.